there, and welcome to the newest episode of Welcome to the New You, Gainesville's #1 podcast in the mind of Larry Green and of all reasonably minded people. We're glad that you're here. We are with the Gainesville Community Counseling Center. You can find us online at www.gainesvillecounselingcenter.com, or you can call us at 352-448-9120. We offer individual, group, family, and couples therapy for any and all issues that you can bring with us, and we're happy to help you anytime that you need help. So again, it's GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com or 352-448-9120. So the podcast is something that we do to provide information to the local community about resources that are available, topics related to mental health, different modalities. We talk about sex, that's my favorite topic, and we'll talk about a little bit about sex today, but not a whole lot. And today we're going to talk about eating disorders or disordered eating. Which is better? Which should I say?
Either one.
Either one?
Yeah.
I always get confused, right? Because sometimes I call it domestic violence. It should be intimate partner violence, and then so either one is fine.
Mm-hmm. There's no right or wrong. I think that disordered eating can often lead into, a diagnosable eating disorder, but
Right.
I don't do much in terms of diagnosis and labeling and categorizing unless it's going to help guide treatment. So disordered eating disorders, we are all good.
Do you want to come on staff here? Anyway, so we're going to talk about that today,
Yeah.
And the history behind it, and some of the causes and symptoms and outcomes that are potentially available. But as we always do, we always focus on mindfulness. And so we like to start off our group time here about talking about mindfulness, because I think it's one of the most effective ways of addressing a lot of issues that we face. So I'm going to introduce very briefly Morgan, who's going to introduce herself in a little while, but I'm going to throw the curveball to you and ask you, what sort of mindfulness techniques do you have centered around eating?
Mm-hmm. I love this question because so many people, when they think about their relationship with food and how they talk to themselves around the eating experience, it can feel really judgy and critical and harsh, and I know they wouldn't speak that way to their friends or family. So one of the concepts from intuitive eating, actually, which we'll talk about a little later, it's called the food anthropologist.
Oh.
And it's just a very neutral observer of the eating experience. So rather than the common dialogue that people who struggle with disordered eating might experience, or people in diet culture not really knowing they're struggling, might sound like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that, I'm gonna have to work this off tomorrow, I'm a failure, I couldn't stick to my diet. Whereas, that's gonna be very unhelpful for you. One of the helpful things that you can do as a food anthropologist is to kind of sit with yourself and label it as if you're watching, like naturally observing it. And you can still label those feelings of guilt. You can label kind of what you're eating, how you're eating it. That might sound something like, I'm noticing that I'm not very hungry. I'm grabbing the bag of chips. I'm noticing that there's a fear that I may indulge in these chips.
Right.
I often don't feel good after I do that. And so really talking to yourself in a supportive way rather than a judgmental way.
Right. So being able to just be present in the moment and experience the total emotional and experiential part of eating. Right?
Yeah.
And so if folks are able to do that, what are some of the benefits for them?
So I think it takes away a lot of the criticism that many of us face when it comes to diet culture, and it helps us become more in tune with our body. So really thinking about the cognitive dissonance that must be there if we're overly full and feeling ill and we're continuing to eat the cookies. That doesn't mean that we're bad or that we need to feel shame or guilt because of that. There must be a reason why we're continuing to do that behavior.
Right.
So it can really help us raise awareness and look for things like paying attention to our body, satisfaction with the eating experience, and overall just more pleasure when you're enjoying something.
I love me some double stuffed Oreos. I can't.
Yes. I saw the they're like the cake Oreos the other day.
Cake Oreos? What?
Yeah, they're like, I don't know, because I'm not a huge fan. You know, my satisfaction with like crunchy desserts, I much prefer a very soft dessert. And so I think they're called like cake toppers or something, but 2 pieces of chocolate cake with some filling in between.
Put that down on our list of kids for tonight. So I'm not allowed to have a lot of desserts for a variety of reasons. Mostly because my favorite dessert is ice cream. And at one point I was on some sleep meds, and one of the side effects was sleep eating. And I would eat an entire thing of ice cream every night. And I would wake up in the morning and there'd be all these bowls. And so my wife said, well, we're just not having ice cream anymore. And that seems like a reasonable solution. So just keep it out of the house. No, because then I went into sleep driving.
Oh no!
And I was an expert at it. And so I would drive across town to Sonic, and then I would get my sweets there, and then I would drive home and not remember doing any of it. So anyway, that's a total aside.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're here with Morgan Ransom, and Morgan is very kind to share some of her time with us this morning or afternoon, whatever time it is. And so tell us a little bit about you and your practice and how you got here.
Yeah. So I have always wanted to be a therapist. Like there's a video of me in kindergarten saying that I wanted to be a psychiatrist. Didn't know the difference between psychology, psychiatry, but I think it's a cute video nonetheless.
Can we see it posted on the web?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to find it. It should be somewhere in the archives.
We could do that.
Yeah. So there's this recording of me saying that I wanted to do that, and basically I just wanted to be able to support people. Did not know what I wanted to specialize in at that point, but did experience my own challenge with disordered eating starting in 8th grade. And I got amazing help for it right off the bat. I had a very supportive family to help me through that. And from that moment on, I really got into kind of understanding, you know, what are eating disorders? How did this happen? Not only for me, but other people. And then went to school to be a counselor and specialized in eating disorder treatment at the time. And then kind of took a turn into intuitive eating, which is, oh my gosh, it's incredible. It's life-changing, both personally and professionally. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, a lot today, when it comes to food and the holidays. But really, really enjoy working with mainly young adults who are struggling in their relationship with food. So even if you don't feel you have an eating disorder, or you know you're not necessarily needing medical support for it, I still want people to feel really comfortable in their relationship with food.
So you have a practice locally?
I do, yeah. So it's all telehealth, so I can see anyone in the state of Florida. That's the beauty of being able to, not have to necessarily pay for an office space, but have access to a lot of different clients needing support. So my website is findyourfreedomtherapy.com. I like that as I was trying to come up with a name for the business, because I really want to help people find their freedom. There's a lot of rigidity generally around relationship with food and body and criticism of self, and to just kind of open that door to something that maybe you didn't know was possible is really important.
So in your experience, like how prevalent are body image issues and disordered eating?
It seems to be everywhere. It really does. It's growing. I think that the ideals for women especially, although eating disorders don't discriminate based on, gender, sexual orientation, race. But yeah, so it's a challenge. I think just living in this world, especially as a young female growing up and trying to attain the quote unquote ideal body.
Yeah, and where does that even come from?
A combination of many things. So one, I think, is just diet culture in general. So diet culture, a quote that I heard a while ago, and you've probably heard it in your work too, but it talks about like fish are swimming around in the water, and then someone comes and says, how's the water? And the fish say like, what's water? And you don't understand because you're just living in it. And so you can't really see the outside until you experience something other than water. So I love that phrase when it comes to diet culture, because a lot of people are very unaware that they're living in it. But really, it's just the idea that we're going to be more accepted, we're going to be happier if we are in this ideal body. And oftentimes people are going to extremes to try to attain this, which actually gets in the way of health and wellness and mental well-being.
Sure.
So it's everywhere. And I think, social media obviously plays a part in it as well. And, just focus on appearance and, wanting to be well liked and seen as worthy in the world. There are lots of judgments that come along with people who are in bodies that don't fit that ideal.
Right. I was reading a story or watching something on TV. The struggles of this particular female was a ballet dancer, right? And when you think of a ballet dancer, there's a very specific physique, right? Very thin, very, very mobile. And she had applied to get into Juilliard or some fancy school like that. Did not even get to dance because of her body. And it turns out that she was an absolutely brilliant dancer and had a lot of skill. But the judgment that came from it, and she was, kind of talking about that struggle of growing up heavier or bigger in a bigger body than people looked at, and the challenges of, as she said, walking in as a chubby little girl into a group of skinny little girls and their judgmental parents along with it. So, there are some challenges that do exist with body image, and part of it is kind of the social pressure that we feel and the images that we see in newspapers, on magazines, internet, the models that are coming out. And so I'm glad to see there being more of a push towards realistic models and plus models, so get away from body shaming. But it does lead to this diet culture, and I can't say I'm exempt from that at all.
None of us are. We're living in it, and if we have a diet culture-y thought, we're not the ones who put that there, but it's more of kind of what we do with that.
Yeah. So what are some of the diet fads that you're seeing out there right now?
Oh my gosh. Intermittent fasting is a really big one.
Pops up on my Facebook feed like 10 times a day.
Yeah, and I think one of the main reasons that can be very harmful is because you're really not listening to your body's cues at that point.
Right.
So you're fighting off hunger. You generally might be eating the same amount in terms of, those hours of the day when you're allowed to eat food. But as soon as you tell someone they can't have something at a certain time, they're going to want it even more.
Right.
So really any diet that's restrictive, cutting out a food group is going to be damaging, because then you're thinking about that item.
Right.
And the night before the diet starts, you're probably eating all of that item without really paying attention to your body, because you're not going to have it again.
Right. Yeah. So there's that one. There's the keto. I don't even know what these are, but Atkins. They're all have been popular over time. But I don't know that really they're as effective as maybe intuitive eating.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think it depends on the goal too. So the diet industry, I had to look it up today for 2022. I think it was $3.8 billion spent in the weight loss industry.
Holy cow.
And diet, weight loss, kind of compatible in terms of that.
Right.
And it's often disguised kind of in the name of health, of like, oh, we just want you to be healthy. But when I read magazines and they say, lose 100 pounds by Thanksgiving, and we're already in September, that doesn't appear to be a health affirming behavior.
Really? I like that article, that ad.
Well, I think,
it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's not realistic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And but oftentimes you'll see, really thin white women on the covers, oftentimes celebrities, and it's like, how to lose 5 pounds this week. And it's like, ooh, like I would be really concerned and might want to put someone in the hospital if they really were that malnourished that week.
Right.
So your original question, though,
so the difference between these fad diets and intuitive eating.
Yes.
And the effectiveness. So talk to us a little bit about intuitive eating and what that is.
Yeah. So these diets that were developed were really a means for people to lose weight. And I think, again, health kind of disguised in that of, oh, you're going to be healthier, you're going to be happier. Intuitive eating says, screw this. We're sick of diet culture mentality.
Amen.
Yes, we are sick of people being judged based on the size of their body, judgments being made about their health based on, how they look. And so intuitive eating is all about, first and foremost, just rejecting the diet mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So what we know about diets is, all those ones you were talking about, keto, Atkins, intermittent fasting, research has been done on those. And we are in an insane community if we believe that dieting works.
Right.
I think the stat is 2 to 5% of people who go on diets maintain their weight loss after a year.
Ooh.
And so that means that
That's
diets,
depressing.
Yeah, it's so depressing, right? So if you go on a diet, you might initially lose some weight, you're feeling maybe good, you're getting some compliments from people, but then what happens when your body actually says like, hey, feed me, like we're wanting this, we're needing this?
Mm-hmm.
That can become really problematic because you're kind of stuck in this mindset of, ooh, if I go off the diet, then am I a failure?
Right.
So I really like the expression, like, we don't fail diets, diets fail us.
Yes.
95 to 98% of the time.
It's almost like it's set up for failure.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. So that's why it's so important with intuitive eating to really get out of the mindset of dieting, and it's all about permission, unconditional permission to listen to your body, to eat what you want, to pay attention to satisfaction, because our bodies are way smarter than us.
Mm-hmm.
Diets try to outsmart the body, to fight off hunger cues.
Right.
But we know that in the long term, that's not going to work for us.
Right. So with intuitive eating, what are some things that you would work with clients on as you teach them this new skill?
Yeah, so it depends on the person, it always does, but there are 10 principles to intuitive eating, and the first, like I've mentioned, is really rejecting the diet mentality.
Mm-hmm.
People will often say like, oh, I want to start intuitive eating, but I need to lose weight first. Or, oh, I'd really like to start moving, but in order to go to a gym, I need to lose weight before I do that.
Right.
And I don't want to discount any of societal judgments against people in bodies that don't fit the ideal. And at the same time, a lot of people are waiting to start their lives until their bodies change.
Right.
So it's kind of, how do we allow permission to accept the body for where it is? And people don't like that phrasing. They say, well, if I'm accepting it, then I'm complacent, then I'm
Right.
just content, it's not going to change, I got to be hard on myself, I got to follow this diet, when really that's just hurting them and keeping them stuck. So accepting where they are, accepting that they want to work on relationship with food and what they're doing isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can really pay attention to like getting in the body, getting into the thoughts of, where did these restrictive thoughts come from, or these all or nothing thoughts around food develop. Sometimes that will go back to family,
Mm-hmm.
parents being on diets. Sometimes that can just go from, going down a rabbit hole with social media.
Right.
It really depends.
Yeah. So it's about, I guess it's more like mindfulness in the midst of eating, and being aware of how kind of your emotions at times are guiding and judging yourself about what you're doing.
Right.
The focus isn't necessarily on weight loss, it's on just healthy eating in general.
Yeah, like a healthy relationship with food. So permission, awareness. One of the principles, which is the third principle, is making peace with all foods. And this can be some of the hardest for people.
I'm going to fight you right there. There will be vegetables I'm never going to be at peace with.
That's totally okay.
Okay, thank
you. Don't have to be, right? So you're allowed to have your preferences.
Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, no. And
those.
you don't have, I do like a good Brussels sprout occasionally, but not the mushy ones. Like, you got to get a nice restaurant, crispy, balsamic Brussels sprout, maybe with some goat cheese on it.
And about a lot of bacon wrapped around it.
Yeah, that sounds good too.
Okay,
we can do that. That's great. Meeting a lot of the body's needs. I'm not a nutritionist, but it seems like you got your fat, your protein, your carb.
See, I love you because you just reframe it into such a nice way, but I'll still never eat Brussels sprouts. I'll eat the bacon on the Brussels sprouts. But
that's fine. Yeah, hopefully you have someone in your life who can then eat the Brussels sprout. Or
my wife.
Yeah, great. Perfect.
So anyway, sorry,
Yes.
interrupted you.
No, you're good.
Make
So,
peace with.
making peace with food. So a lot of this is many of us grow up thinking certain foods are good, bad, healthy, unhealthy, and we categorize it like
Right.
that. People will say, "Oh, I just need to stop eating junk food." Eating quote unquote junk food, I don't really call it that. I call it maybe fun foods. Again, a reframe that
Yes.
sounds a little bit gentler. But eating those foods like brings us pleasure, and we're allowed to enjoy eating.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, there's something in the body that's probably drawing us to those types of foods.
Right.
So for instance, there's something, you'll love this, it's called sex with your pants on.
Oh.
And this is a concept in
I want a picture of that.
yeah, well, it's with food, so it's a little bit different. I haven't come across any graphic photos of this, but
I'll find it.
so sex with your pants on is this concept that when people are on a diet, they try to create these like pseudo replacements for foods that they love.
Mm-hmm.
And they might be okay, but they're not as good as the real thing, right? So you get the point. So an example of this could be like paleo pancakes, right? Or people making pancakes now with like banana instead of flour,
Right.
or chickpea cookie dough, or black bean brownies. And it's like we're trying to put, you know, these nutrients into things where they don't really belong. And then we're ultimately not really satisfied because it's not the real thing.
Right.
Yeah, so we'd be better off just kind of having the real thing and then moving forward with what we're doing. So with dieting,
I love this model.
yes, yeah. Why do you love it?
Because it allows me to eat some things that are on my naughty list.
Yes.
I'm going to share this podcast with my wife.
Perfect. Yeah.
She-
No, she's welcome to come in and hear some of this. But yeah, it seems like you have some forbidden foods of like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this. This is bad for me.
Ice cream, cookie dough. There's lots of them.
Those are some of my favorite foods. They're absolutely delicious. Yeah.
Yes, okay.
And so a lot of people, you know, if you're on a diet and you're craving something sweet, kind of the typical reaction is, okay, I'll have an apple. Okay, I'll have, you know, a rice cake with honey on it or something. Like they're trying to just make something that's not a brownie, right? You just want the brownie, the real brownie, not the black bean brownie.
Not the sugar-free ice cream. I want the real ice cream.
Yes. And so the challenge is, so if you have all these kind of like replacements, I think they're called phantom foods in intuitive eating. If you try to fill it with phantom foods, you're not actually getting the real thing. And at the end of the day, your body could have been needing the fat that was in the brownie, not necessarily the sugar. We automatically think sugar when we're craving something sweet, but a brownie has significant, you know, fat in it, and if we're deprived from fat throughout our day, we're going to want that and need that. So I think it's just like, whoa, the body is super cool.
I love this. So your body, and we use this a lot with trauma, right? Like your body talks to you and tells you. And so in intuitive eating, you're saying it's do the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And part of that can be a physical need, part of it could be an emotional need.
And it's okay to meet that need. Is there ever a point at which you're over meeting that need?
So yes, right? So I think like sometimes we use food to cope. And like if we never allowed ourselves permission to use food to cope with something, that would be problematic. That would be far too rigid. And sometimes we need a coping strategy. And so if we're aware that that's what we're doing, then that's great. I think that's the first step. So a difference that I see often is, you know, I've had clients who work in restaurants, let's say, and they used to go to work and they would, you know, eat whatever the free food was and, you know, enjoy that. And then one day they said, okay, one day maybe I'm not as hungry. I don't really want that. Maybe I want this instead. And then another day they said, Morgan, it felt so good because I decided this all looks so good. I'm starving. I will likely overeat. And that awareness of, oh, okay, I might eat past my fullness today, and I'm just accepting that. I'm not saying that, you know, I can never do this, that this is forbidden. I'm not going to shame myself for it. I'm just going to be aware of it. You know, we all have our vices sometimes, and, you know, occasionally using that, you know, is not the end of the world. Let's just be gentle with ourselves and try to figure out. Oftentimes it'll be, I talked to my mom a while ago and she was like, oh, we've just been eating so much bread with dinner. And I'm like, great, like bread's delicious, awesome, like you put butter on it, what's happening? And she said, well, the other night at dinner, I had 3 pieces of bread. And I'm like, well, tell me about earlier that day. She said, well, I was so busy running errands and I was so hungry. I stopped and, got this. And then I didn't eat for, 6-7 hours. And then we show up to the restaurant. And I said, well, no shit, Mom, you're going to eat 3 pieces of bread because you were starving and carbs are the preferred source of energy for the body.
Right.
So we're going to go to those like quick options when we're deprived.
Right. I love it. One of the things I love to eat is bread, right? And oddly, we don't have any in the house anymore. We had some bread for the hurricane because you have to have bread and milk for every hurricane. So I went and got bread, and
that's not what that was for.
well, yeah, she tried to kill the dog and let the dog eat the chicken bones that had been cooked. So the bread was for that, but I only gave her 1 piece, so the rest was for me.
Okay, great. What type of bread?
I with whole wheat, which I would not have done, right? Except for that judgment. I hear my wife's voice in the background going, "If you're gonna do the carbs, do the whole wheat. It's healthier for you." Well, I would rather have the white meat, or even better, the Hawaiian, I forget what it's called.
They're so good.
I know, it's like I could eat the whole thing all at once. But anyway, so it's nice that you talk to your parents, your mom, about that you're able to do this, and that's part of the intuitiveness about eating is kind of going back in the day and saying, oh, well, this kind of makes sense that I'm craving this because of everything that happened, and that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I remember one time I was at, when I was still working in an office, I went to Publix for lunch and I saw that chocolate was on sale. And I was like, ooh, chocolate sounds great. And so when I got to the register, it wasn't ringing up on sale. And being the cheap person that I am at times, I was like, okay, well, I'm just not going to get the chocolate then. It's not, 3 for $10, it's $4.99 or whatever.
Right.
And so then I get home and I'm with my fiance or boyfriend at the time. He's now my husband. But I get home and late at night after dinner, I'm like, do we have like Snickers? Like, I'm eating Snickers, I'm eating ice cream. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I'm like, oh my gosh, my body was giving me a subtle cue at lunch that I really wanted chocolate, and I ignored it. Not because I was thinking chocolate's bad, it was just because I didn't want to spend the $4.99, which looking back, I'm just going to spend it in the future.
Right.
But I'm like, oh my gosh, the cue got louder and louder and louder the more that I ignored it. And so like when you say, oh, I could eat the whole thing of Hawaiian rolls, well, if I deprived myself of Hawaiian rolls and then had access and I knew this was my one opportunity,
yes,
I would then be like, oh yeah, I'm going for it.
I am going shopping tonight and I'm not telling my wife.
Yes.
And I'm just going to show up with all of my favorite foods and suffer the consequences later.
Yeah, and I hear that.
Morgan's like, don't do that.
No, I think it's great. And if your wife is watching this podcast, no judgment at all, because I think like, in the name of health, like we,
you do things.
Research wise, whole wheat could be, slightly better than like a white sub roll or something. Right. And at the same time, like, let's let you figure that out. So one of the things you can do is maybe one day, have a white bread sandwich, one day have a wheat bread sandwich, and decide, did I feel any different on either of those days?
And that's the part I would have trouble with, because I would not do that. I would just say, oh, that was much better yesterday because it was the white bread with lots of mayonnaise. So,
but I wonder, so like ice cream, cookie dough, you said those are some of your favorite foods. If you ate that all day, every day, and your house was made out of like ice cream cones and cookie dough, would you ever get sick of it?
Yes, because I'm also lactose intolerant.
Okay, yes. Okay, that's so cool.
It's not cool eating the ice cream.
Right. Well, we'll take a Lactaid. We'll deal with that when we need to. But we're finding a dairy-free option. But like your body's also giving you a cue of like, oh, like we don't feel so good when we eat this.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you can't have it or shouldn't have it. It just means like
you're
you
going
need
to
to be
suffer
aware.
the consequences.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't eat as much ice cream now as I used to because the consequences are significant. But when I do want it, I eat it. So
Good.
I'm
Very intuitive of
I'm
you.
intuitively eating ice cream. The desserts I would love, but anyway. But the whole notion of our relationship with food, for me also brings back family of origin issues and cultural issues as well. Like I grew up with a Greek family, and the Greek families, like Italian families, are loud, they're boisterous, there's tons and tons of food, and you go home and when you're early in life, the grandparents and the aunts and uncles will say, oh, we need to fatten you up because you're not healthy. And then you get my age and they look at you and go, you're too fat, what happened to you? Well, you fed me so much when I was a younger kid. But we learn a lot about our relationship with food, I think, from those early experiences of growing up with our families, whatever that family looks like. So is that, but that's just my assumption, is that a reality? Does research support that?
Absolutely, yeah. And you identified the cultural piece as well. So I'm Italian, my husband is Greek.
Oh,
and so we have it on both sides of the family, yes. But I totally hear you that, when I visit my grandparents, it's almost, and I did have to set a boundary with them at one point because they just like shove food at you and they're like, you need this, eat this, eat this. And everyone at the table is like, no, you have it, like, you need to eat it. And I finally said, guys, like, there is nothing stopping us from taking the food. Like, if we want it, we're going to take it. If we don't want it, we're not going to take it. But you don't need to be responsible for my eating. So I've definitely grown in my confidence with my family, and they joke around of like, oh, we can't say anything around you.
She's gonna correct us. She's gonna therapize us.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, family of origin is a big source of how we learn about our relationship with everything, and especially food. And I think part of the saddest thing is growing up, if people have had their own challenges, let's say a parent has had their own challenges with it and not necessarily gotten the right type of help that they deserve, they might put that on their kids too.
Right.
And even things like diets or quotes like, okay, yeah, everything's fine, but in moderation, that's harmful in some ways too. And it might not seem like it, but our body naturally moderates.
Sure.
And especially, as we grow up, we learn, what our preferences are. But, kids, like, I think they should be allowed to eat mac and cheese and chicken tenders and ice cream and, throw in a vegetable here and there if you want. But hey, if they hate vegetables, maybe it's a smoothie, right?
Do you know how many parents have come in struggling with how to get their kids to eat, and I tell them that, like, it's okay if they graze, let them graze.
Yeah.
What's the worst case what's worse than that's gonna happen to them?
Yeah.
So they have food on the table, they'll come and they'll eat when they're ready. Why do they have to sit down and eat their entire plate? Make a happy happy plate.
Yeah,
happy
clean plate club.
Yes. I'm like, yes, well, I'll make it. But and our son was that way. He would and still is, he'll graze. And so he'll get a little bit here, a little bit there, and that's just what he does. And he will eat chicken nuggets all day long. And he is like thin as a rail, he's part of, he's gay. And so I'm going to talk about that aspect as well, and the body image issues within the gay lesbian population as well, because I think it's very prominent there in a different way than maybe heterosexual community. So grazing is fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all different types of eaters. We don't have to be hunters and gatherers like we once were, where we were programmed to kind of...
We can evolve.
Yeah, we can evolve, and everyone has different preferences when it comes to it. I think as responsive as we can be to our body, the better. I mean, some people are like that with sleep too, and I don't know a ton of research with sleep, but hey, if you want to take a nap and you're still able to sleep well at night, if you're taking a nap, great,
right.
Go for it.
Go for it, yeah. So the challenge, with our family of origin and those experiences, or my experience with disordered eating, the limited that it has been, is that there oftentimes is a relationship between the amount of control that the parents either exert or try to exert, or the child perceives that they have. And so eating can then become one place where they can reject that, or they can control the chaos that is within the family. Is that accurate?
100% evidence-based,
yes.
accurate. You nailed it. That more rigidity from parents around eating is correlated with eating disorders.
Right.
And the best way that we can have, kids who are becoming adults have a good relationship with food is that permission, like you said, just kind of the free eating. Now, there needs to be some,
Boundaries,
structure
right.
around it, but at the same time, we're not talking about body size. We're not talking about exercise as a means to burn off food or other harmful things like that. We're just
right.
saying, yeah, we need energy.
Right. Now, we've used the terms disordered eating and eating disorders. Is there a difference?
So I think, things that I've read before kind of say that, diet culture, diet language, it can often start off like that and then transition into disordered eating. I think that dieting is a form of disordered eating, truly, if we are doing it for weight loss purposes only, or mainly, I think that can be problematic. Now, an eating disorder, again, we talked about that, big book at the beginning with all the diagnoses.
Right.
And so, in order to kind of meet that, it's just causing impairment in your life. So a preoccupation with food, body, that's taking away from, how you're feeling, your health, your, work or academics, your social functioning, things
Sure.
like that. So it can get more extreme. So someone who's just dieting might be experiencing some like internal struggle, but it might not be impacting too many domains of their life just yet.
Right.
But like you said, or like, many of us have talked about, like reinforcing and praising that initial dieting or weight loss. So people getting compliments when they start a diet of, oh, you're being so good. It's like, ooh, was I bad before?
Right.
Or, wow, like you look great, you've lost so much weight. It's like, well, what did you think like I looked like before then? And I need to maintain this. And that's when it can get really unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't, and I've said this before, I don't work with eating disorders because I find them to be, they're very challenging. I mean, it requires an immense amount of work and attention with the whole system, really. So intuitive eating is one way. Are there other approaches that are helpful for folks who are dealing with disordered eating disorders, however you want to call it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So intuitive eating really is for people who are at a place in their recovery where they're able to truly listen to their body and trust that. Whereas with disorders like anorexia, if I told them to eat intuitively, that would be problematic because they've probably lost touch with their hunger cues. They've been avoiding them for so long that they're not able, they're going to say, okay, well, if I eat intuitively, then I don't really need to eat because I'm never hungry.
Right.
So there are parts of recovery where you're going to need to push that limit a little bit. So anorexia is kind of the main exception with restrictive disorders. There is a period of refeeding that needs to happen, weight restoration until you can start intuitive eating. But it tends to be a pretty good approach with disorders like binge eating. You might be able to jump right into some of the principles there.
Right.
But with anorexia and maybe some of the other disorders, there are different types of therapy. So meal support, I offer that, 30-minute sessions over Zoom where we can eat together and challenge a feared food. There are residential options if they're needing more support where they actually go and stay somewhere. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of how families handle mealtime if it is an adolescent who's struggling or kid, and navigating those family dynamics, as I'm sure you know a lot about, can be very tricky.
Yeah, and it's not just we're highlighting the fact that it's not just about weight loss. It's not just about what you eat, what you don't eat. It's tied to your overall emotional, mental, and physical health, right? Because when we find ourselves restricting to such an extent that we do lose our cues to eat, it has a physical impact on us and potentially endangers our life. And I don't think many people really understand how dangerous and how deadly like anorexia can be, and bulimia even, right? And because it affects not only your looks, but it affects your heart, and it affects your heart rate. It affects your gut working, and all that stuff. So when a family comes to you and they're struggling to help their child who's exhibiting signs of anorexia, what are some things that you would suggest to them? Like, if we have somebody listening in the audience today that says, I think my child is struggling with this, what would you suggest to that parent or the parents or guardians or whoever?
I would say, first of all, great that they're trying to get some help for it. And the first thing that they can do is go to a professional and get evaluated for kind of where their kid is in terms of risk and level of care that's needed.
Right.
So with eating disorder treatment, there are about 4 levels of care. There's outpatient, which is the work that I do, and you need to be pretty medically stable in order to do that, because I'm not a doctor. I don't want to be a doctor, but yeah, I'm here to help kind of with the mind, but only so much we can do for an hour a week.
Right.
Then there's the intensive outpatient, which might consist of group therapy that they'll go to throughout the week and individual therapy a couple times. There's a partial hospitalization option, and then an inpatient option as well. And if it's really severe and it's causing a lot of impairment in their life, then the kid will likely need to go to that more inpatient option.
Do we have resources in the general area?
Sadly, no.
Really?
So there are a few outpatient resources in terms of dietitians, doctors, therapists who do work with eating disorders, although it's not a huge group of people in the Gainesville community.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of residential or inpatient options within the state of Florida. There's one in Miami called Oliver Pyatt. They have an adolescent unit too, which is Clementine. It's wonderful. We have one in Tampa Clearwater area called Fairwinds. There are a couple locations for a place called Center for Discovery. And maybe I can shoot you a list too if people would like to see these. Because there are some good options, but you do need to travel, and insurance may or may not cover the cost, which is another barrier to getting help that they need.
Now, do you take insurance?
I do not take insurance. However, I can provide something to give to an insurance company for possible reimbursement. And I'm usually very willing to work with my clients too, especially if finances are a concern.
Yeah. So let's hit your website and your phone number again. So if somebody is looking for help, how do they get you?
Yeah, so findyourfreedomtherapy.com is my website. My number is 352-448-5627. And yeah, I'm open to accepting new clients and having a conversation, and also willing, if it doesn't feel like the right fit, or if it's not an affordable option or a realistic option in terms of scheduling, I'm happy to provide other resources. There's a great website, actually they're based out of Florida, but it's called findedhelp.com. Findedhelp.com, and you can actually sort by your insurance and the level of care that you're looking for.
Cool.
And you can do it by state. You could say I'm looking for a treatment center or a practitioner. If you want like an all-male treatment center, you can search for that. So very specific.
That would not be fun.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, guys don't have emotions, so.
Oh, right. Yeah.
We don't have emotions.
No, and they definitely don't have eating disorders ever, right?
No, we don't. Well,
just anger.
Yeah, that's it. Holy heart. And now we can show sadness. We can show tears, rarely, but mostly anger. So that has been one of the oddities for me. Is not oddities. That's not the word I wanted. But the growing awareness of many in the community that males have or can have body image issues as well. I mean, it's historically been a female problem, right? But guys have it too. I mean, how many times do we hear middle school and high school kids talk about the buff body, right? And then when you are looking at, if we go back to particularly the gay and bi male population, there's a huge emphasis on the perfect body. I mean, they have like these 24-pack abs, and they're pushing the fad diets, and they're doing this, and there's this not consensus, but there is this reality within that population that holds meaning and holds weight and holds value, as opposed to what they call chubby chasers and those sorts of things.
Right.
Is that something that you experience as well?
Yes, yeah. So I've definitely seen that in my practice, working with clients who are gay or bisexual, and struggling with meeting that male ideal and wanting to be attractive to other males. But yeah, I was wondering too, because you mentioned like your son and just kind of your own knowledge of this. Like, why do you think that is specific to like part of the gay community?
I need to do a study on that.
Yeah.
I think if I don't want to analyze my son, but I think for him, he's always been skinny anyway. And putting on any weight that's just something I do. But he, in particular, rejects that reality or that part of the culture. I don't know that he outright intentionally rejects it, but he doesn't believe that you have to have the perfect body in order to do that. And maybe that's because I don't think we've ever really focused on you gotta have a perfect body. We have focused more on health and healthy eating, and done some of the fads and the restrictives, medication, management of weight and those sort of things. But I think it's when you look at social media and when you look at the media platform and all, even within movies and shows that highlight, gay and lesbian or gay and bi males, it's that image, right? And there's something very sexualizing about that population, that's what you have. And I don't know exactly, from what I understand, it's been there for a long time. It's nothing new, but I suspect it's part of that whole hypersexualization that people perceive that exists within the gay and bi male population in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree based on what I've heard and the limited knowledge that I have on it, that there are these different pockets of cultures or identities where there's this different ideal that people need to fit.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. You see it a little bit too in like the bodybuilding community and things like that for both, for all genders.
Right.
Just the pressure to meet whatever that ideal is.
Yeah, and it's just very the amount of stigma that population in particular faces for not having the ideal of what a body is, and it's very judgy. If you were to sit up and listen at the UC to some of the folks talk about it, they're very judgy when it comes to body types. And I think that population would admit that, at least the gay and bi males that I look at, I know and talk to, and the kids that I've adopted, they'll say, yeah, we judge. But you ask them the same question, why? Where does that come from? They have a general sense, but it all goes back to a hypersexualization of the male body in particular. So it's very odd. Speaking of sex, how does intuitive eating and how does body image, how do body image issues and everything relate to one's view of sexuality and joy of sex?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question.
I know. You know why
you were
I have
ready
it?
for it.
I was, because our official sponsor for this podcast and all podcasts is PleasurePoints.shop, where you can purchase any and all toys to supply your adult needs. www.pleasurepoints.com, where you can pleasure yourself while helping others, because the proceeds go to pay for and support counseling and therapy for folks in this community who can't otherwise afford it. So go and pleasure yourself and make us happy here and give us those donations, and there's a lot of things they can buy on there. So that's why we went to sex.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, well, thank you for that. There's so much I could say about this, but I think that allowing yourself to experience joy in life, freedom, like we've talked about, pleasure, and really be in the moment with an experience. If we're over controlled with food or sex or sleep or whatever, exercise, whatever it is, like it's going to lose a lot of its pleasure and enjoyment.
Sure.
And so I find that people who are more comfortable in their bodies have, more pleasure, satisfaction in their sexual interactions and relationships.
Right. They're not judging themselves.
No.
They're not, all that other stuff.
Yeah, like we all know what it's like to be in your head during sex, and it's like that's the worst feeling in the world,
Right.
because you're just not enjoying the moment. So again, with the mindfulness component, it's important to try to feel good in your body and not hide your body. But again, you can do some work around that on a personal level too. So even some of my clients, if they're having trouble accepting a part of their body,
Mm-hmm.
I might encourage them to actually do something kind for that part of their body. So for many women, it's the stomach area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I might say, okay, can we, put lotion on our stomach? Can we, rather than describing it as, jiggly and gross, can we say, ooh, it's like soft and warm and
It's a good
like,
pillow.
Yeah, it's a good pillow. And, it's okay to have like fat on your body and wherever your body wants to be. And I think that there's so much about just acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
and also finding a partner who accepts your body, and someone who's not going to judge your body in those really vulnerable moments.
Yeah, and I think that's historically it's been much more of a challenge. I think for women whose bodies undergo a significant amount of change with the thing called birth.
Yep.
And the level of judgment and difficulty in their male partners to accept the changes in those bodies astounds me. And every time a guy will, because when I do couples therapy, I will have an intake session where I talk with both of them, then I'll separate them for a session so I can talk to each of them individually. And I cannot tell you how many times a guy will say, I'm just not attracted to her anymore. And I say, well, why is that? And he'll talk about the body, and she's just let herself go, and she's doing this, and before kids she was this way. And then I turn the tables on him and I'll say, well, what are you doing to help with all of that? And what are you contributing to? And how did your body change during the pregnancy? I mean, what biologically and chemically, what changed in your body? And are you the same today as, right? And where does that image that she needs to have this body come from? And,
Totally.
right. And they don't like it when I do that, but I'm like, the other option is to say, you're being an asshole.
Yeah.
Right. And I do have a group that we are still trying to get off the ground and running called How Not to Be an Asshole in Your Relationship. And that's
so awesome.
That's one of the ways, right? But there is this image, right, of in fact was it Showtime or it was one of the sexually related educational shows on one of the channels. I don't remember which one it was, but there was a sex coach, sexuality coach, who was working with an older female who had been a track star in her younger days, and her body had changed so much that she really had difficulty even looking at herself naked. Now, honey, I will never do this to any of my clients, but they got naked in front of a mirror and began talking about, and it was storytelling. So what is the story of that stretch mark? Where is that? What does that tell you, right, about where you have been with your body in life? And then I forget what the other person's issue was, but that was it. They were telling their stories of how your body has changed and how your body has supported you in those changes over life, and the good, the bad, the ugly.
Absolutely.
With the goal being just accept yourself for who you are.
Yeah, like in this moment, like we don't need to change it. We don't need to have an expectation. Wow. Yeah, no, this is bringing up a lot for me. So you don't know this, I don't think. I'm 30 weeks pregnant. And so, so I am carrying a baby. I'm wearing kind of loose clothes. I was a little late today because I was like, I'm trying to find pants that fit me. My husband came home for lunch.
I do that every day.
I work from home, so I wear pajama bottoms during the day, but I'm like, I'll find something that feels comfortable.
But you wear a nice shirt on top,
I
right?
do, of course, yeah. And so, yeah, just like feeling so grateful to have the husband that I do, being really accepting of my body, but then also imagining what it would be like to not have that support, because it's so normalized for, especially interacting with women who say, to other women, oh, you're carrying so well, or, oh, look at your little bump. And it's just like, ooh, those comments, they're trying to say something that's a compliment, but like, what if it's like an adorable large bump? Like, is it not allowed to be enormous? Like, your body is growing a human.
Right.
So you're bringing up a lot just in terms of your own, view of self during pregnancy and as the body changes as you grow up. I remember I was at a baby shower about a year ago, and Thanksgiving was coming up, and someone told the person who was having a baby, they were like, oh, you're so lucky because you get to eat whatever you want at Thanksgiving this year because you're eating for two, right? And it's like, ooh, but like, if we're not pregnant, are we still allowed to eat whatever we want?
No, apparently not.
Yeah, apparently not, right? And so then it went into some, self-judgment for that person of, oh, I had just given birth in October, and, I was trying to work off the pregnancy weight and things like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the fact that so many people are worrying about changing their body after doing this like incredible thing, it might not want to go back to where it was.
It might not be able to go back.
It might not be able to. So the acceptance through that, and early on in my pregnancy, I think there were some jabs that I was probably making at myself of like, oh, like I'm feeling huge or whatever.
Yeah.
And one time, kind of disguised in a joke, but seeing, how's my husband going to react to this comment? And one day I said, you know what, I'm not going to make any more negative comments about my body throughout this pregnancy. And he said, thank you. He said, that's wonderful. He said, what you're doing is amazing. And it's just important to have support.
Absolutely it is. Yeah. So you mentioned Thanksgiving. Holiday seasons are coming up. I'm assuming that those the holiday seasons are can be challenging for folks who have disordered eating thoughts or are struggling with an actual eating disorder.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest to them as they start to prepare for, going home, visiting parents, the anxiety related to it, and how do they get through it?
Yeah, it is a very difficult time of year, as you can imagine, for people who are struggling with disordered eating or, at a point in their recovery. I think, the number one thing is maybe like decide if you even want to go home.
You mean they have an option?
They have an option.
Oh my
right?
gosh,
so
yes.
The main thing that comes up for me when we talk about this is just like boundaries. And depending on where your family and your friends are in terms of like their knowledge of what you're experiencing, and also how open they are to like hearing you, that might look a lot different. If they're not capable of refraining from comments around weight, and you know that it's going to be a vulnerable place for you in your recovery, you don't have to go.
Right.
Easier said than done.
Sure.
But if you do go and maybe they're not as aware, you can form some physical boundaries by, taking some time alone. Or you can be more assertive if you feel comfortable with your family in order to do that, or even if it feels a little uncomfortable. And you can speak up for yourself if a comment is made.
Right.
So like an example of this, I think a lot of people, even my family, might say something like, oh, like saving up for the big meal tonight. And it's like, well, what are we saving? Like, what are we losing? I'm confused here. And so, for instance, I imagine if I were to go make, waffles on Thanksgiving morning and we were eating Thanksgiving lunch, someone might say like, oh, why are you making waffles? Like, you might spoil your appetite. And it's like, no, but like, I'm hungry now and I want waffles and I'm going to do that. And like, even though Thanksgiving is, the one meal a year, it doesn't have to be. Like, who says we can't make a Thanksgiving dinner when we're, when it's April or when it's June?
Exactly.
Like,
and who says we can only use China for fancy meals?
Yes.
Use this shit whenever you can.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is being able to kind of assert, right? And boundaries in particular for clients feel awkward, right? Because they feel bad about enforcing them. And so the way I tell them is, look, the boundary isn't about telling people no. The boundary is about teaching them how to access you in ways which are helpful. So you're helping them, right? The opposite is you just say no to yourself and say yes to them, which is going to create you being a client of mine for a lot longer than you need to be.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's okay to say no.
I love that definition of boundaries of like, it's not about pushing you away. It's about, how you can be a helpful and supportive figure in my life. And, this is how we can grow closer if you respect this boundary.
Yeah, that's it. This is the map to me. This is the map to my heart. This is the map to safety. And if you don't like it, piss off.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And I think, just kind of going back to honoring your body and listening to your body, it's very normal to experience some disordered or judgy thoughts around food. Even if you don't really have an eating disorder, like there might be some judgment of, I've gained so much weight, or, kind of justifying the body that you're in, or things like that, people commenting on your body, or, even the family questions of like, oh, are you dating anyone yet? Like, oh, like, be patient, you'll find someone. It's like, well, do I even want to find someone? I don't know. So food and all of this kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, I think just kind of honoring your body, honoring your own, expectations for self, and, who you are.
And I like that idea of creating a kind of a safe space for yourself, like an escape route. So I tell couples that as well, like when you're going to visit the in-laws, sometimes you have to have an escape route.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Yes.
And you need a code word. So you can say this code word, and hopefully the other person will go, oh, that's our code word. We need to go. And don't ask questions, just go.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to explain it. It's your space, it's your plan, enact it.
Absolutely.
Right? And that gives you that sense of power and control.
Absolutely.
Over things. So
yeah.
Anyway. So we kind of wandered all over the place with all of these things, and I'm sure there's a lot more avenues that we could go down. But overall, it seems to me like one of the major areas that we need to continue to focus on is eliminating the social stigma related to you have to have a certain body style and body type, and that effing BMI.
So bad.
Yes, I don't like that. And then get into a place where we're using mindfulness, intuitive eating, as a way of being aware of what's motivating us, right? Kind of like a 12-step program, right? And being aware of what's going on.
Really, yeah. I mean, and those 10 principles of intuitive eating kind of spot on in terms of going step by step. And it doesn't mean that you can't come back to something, but you do need to do them in order.
Right.
And there's the intuitive eating workbook is a great resource, the book as well, to help people kind of navigate those early stages of intuitive eating.
Right. And you can get that on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon,
on the Kindle, on the Kindle Google.
If you want to shop somewhere else, for whatever reason,
you will not find it at pleasurepoints.shop. I'm just telling you.
Unfortunately, but maybe we could give them a few copies. I don't know.
We may. We give you something else to read. But anyway, I appreciate you coming and being part of this, and sharing some of your experience with your journey, and also offering yourself out as a resource for the local community. And I hope we will be able to come back and do this again and expand on our conversation and keep it in the forefront, because I think it's something that's very important to the community at large.
Yeah.
No pun intended. Right. And so thank you for sharing your experience and your time. And once again, folks want to get in touch with you, it is what?
FindYourFreedomTherapy.com. I almost forgot the name of my own website, but there it is. And Morgan Ransom, 352-448-5627.
Very good. And if she's not available, you can call us here at GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com, 352-448-9120, or find us on the interwebs at www.GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com. And go to the YouTube, hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends, your enemies, and everybody else. And, oh, hold on. My director's telling me to do what? Giving Tuesday. Oh, gosh, that's coming up. Do you know what that is?
No.
Giving Tuesday is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, right, the 29th. And it is a push to raise funds for nonprofits, really. And for us, our goal is $5,000. And we're going to be pushing out some social media related to Giving Tuesday to raise those funds. And again, every time we raise funds, it goes to provide low cost or free counseling for people in the local community. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel, and you can download this on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Again, we are the Gainesville Counseling Center, and we are out. Peace.